Awesome. Well, hey, legends, welcome back to Real Talk with Caleb. I got a couple of my good friends on here and wingmen. I refer to them as my brothers, and we just want to discuss a couple of things with you today. A lot of times you might hear, and it doesn't matter what organization you're in. We happen to be in the United States Air Force, but it doesn't matter. It transcends all organizations and different levels of leadership. When we talk about failure, so you hear people say it a lot, right? They'll say, hey, you got to fail and fail forward and move on. To be honest with you, Adam brought up a good point the other day. We don't hear a whole lot of people actually talking about that failure. Um, and we're just real people that have had some failures, and we wanted to share those with you. So I'll just kick it around. This is a recorded Zoom, so you'll be able to see it in that regard. But I'll just kick it around, and we'll start off with you, Adam, if you just want to kind of introduce yourself.
Sure thing. My name's Adam Boobity. Been in the Air Force coming up here on 17 years. And right now I'm out deployed. I'm the superintendent for the 386 Expeditionary Civil Engineer Squadron, kicking ass out here. But found myself a little bit of a quiet place, and I'm happy to be part of this. When it kicked off, I liked how you jumped in on the comment I put on Facebook. This all started when I was reading a book, and it's kind of hinted at failure. And all I could think is hey, don't let that paralyze you. And I thought about all the times where it's not so much that you actually failed, but more along the lines of is you chose to do nothing because you were afraid of failing, which that limited your success. It limited your success and the success of your team and everybody you work with. And as that idea grew and we started this discussion, decided to do this little Zoom call. So I'm happy to be a part of it and kind of talk about personally how we failed. And I had a few ideas to discuss from my perspective, things that I've personally done. One of those being like just as a supervisor was failing to really take a hold and invest time into low performers, right? It's really easy to look at those shiny pennies and say like, hey, these high performers, if I say, hey, go do, or hey, go do this, and give them developmental advice and they do it, and then reward them and invest more and more and more into them, and then you see them achieve. And when you try to do that same thing with all your airmen, right? Sometimes it doesn't work. And it turns into their failure to perform because you're expecting the same level of performance out of them after what you're doing, because you're just trying to replicate it, right? You figure your approach is going to work, and then it ends up failing, and you almost hold it against that person to say like, well, you're not measuring up, instead of going, well, why are you not getting on board with the program? Why can't we get you to where you have the potential to be? And you without really knowing them, without digging deep and figuring out what's troubling them and what's stopping that growth, then you're failing as a leader.
Absolutely. That's a good point, Adam. I don't know if y'all know Carlo Mangoba. Chief Mangoba's out at the 554. And Greg, we'll get to you for a quick introduction here. But when I met Carlo, me and him go back for a little ways, and I was brand new squadron superintendent, and I had a couple of senior mass sergeants that were whoa, bro, you need to calm down. But nobody said that, right? And Carlo, and this is to your point, and Carlo shared this podcast with me about your horse. And I think what I hear you saying there, Adam, is about we're all on different horses, right? We all ride at a different speed, different types, right? And we all interpret things at a different speed as well, and be able to execute on that. So that was a really good podcast. The name escapes me right now, but he shared that with me, and I was like, man, that's some good feedback, Carlo. I appreciate it. I said the senior mass sergeants, there's a couple of mass sergeants who were flight chiefs too. So for the civilians out there, the flight chiefs, think about more of like a mid-level management in your organization. But so I sat him down. I was like, I'm sorry. So that's one of the failures I'll talk about in a little bit, about not recognizing what horse I was on and thinking everybody else should be on the same horse because it was normal to me. But before we go too much further, Greg, you're the other guy on here, with the other brother on here we want to talk to. So if you could just real quick kind of introduce yourself and what you want to talk about. And then we'll circle back to you, Adam.
So legendary leaders, I'm senior master sergeant Whitted, coming from Nellis Air Force Base here. I'm the heavy repair superintendent. When we were tossing around the idea, I said, man, I want to talk about failure. I said, well, we have to define what failure is first. And, I looked it up in the dictionary, and there I was. It said Greg Whittick. It really didn't say that. But we can all probably relate to that because it is the lack of success or the omission or expected required action. But I said, hey, who's the audience that I'm speaking to today? A lot of people know what failure is, but I actually like to take them back before the action itself, the fear of failure. And it's because it is the worry, anxiety, and just that failure to act that Adam touched on a little bit earlier, that puts us in that stagnant, steady state, if you will. And we find ourselves doing that because we're worrying about things. We're 1 out of 4 people. So I looked this up. Google says, Google is my friend, by the way.
The Oracle.
Yeah. Google says, hey, 1 out of 4 people suffer from worrying or anxiety. And I said, man, that is so true. And what that does, it stops us in our tracks, and it prevents us from doing a lot of things. Don't get wrapped up in the statistics, but 89% of what we worry about and what we think about, what we think other people are thinking about, that's not even the case. So then that prevents us from actually acting on something, and it holds us back from our successes. And I said, man, that is so true, so true. You play the Monday morning quarterback. There could be times where you're saying, hey, I'd like to go ahead and speak on this. Could be this podcast or something like this, but maybe it's that fear of like, hey, how are people going to accept this? And to me, I'm like, hey, let's do it. Let's do it.
Yep.
Because you can just add that little tick mark on there and say, if I butcher this, all right, add it to my list. But same thing, with the man in the arena, Theodore Roosevelt, we are the guys in the arena. So what was awesome was, like, even today, I looked on the Legendary Leaders thing. Caleb, you put out something earlier. You said you challenged individuals to grab that real talk and do something. So you're taking stuff and you're encouraging people to put it into action. And I can't agree more, because people do need that push. And that's what I believe, is that people, like, we're stagnant. We're stagnant because of that fear of that group of individuals that are saying, hey, oh, look at them, when that might not even be the case. Or if they are, those are the people that we actually need to grab. So, Adam, you talked about it a little earlier about those, not the shiny pennies, but the other side of the group, the misfits. Those people, they have the potential too. We should be reaching down and grabbing those misfits, because the power that everybody has, I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy what people bring to the table, especially when you let them or give them an opportunity to go ahead and do so. I look at it as when we're riding the bike, right? When we first learn how to ride a bike, we say, all right, you start pedaling, whatever, you fall down. But how do you get better? You get better by trying.
Absolutely.
Next thing you know, you're over here, you're doing the triathlon sprints. You're doing the Tour de France. I don't know if people are doing that, but hey, they started somewhere, right?
Some
Okay.
people are. Just not this guy.
Right. They are. So you say, okay, so looking at the side of the spectrum, you say, hey, social media. Social media right now, obviously we're using social media platform to go ahead and advertise this stuff or get it out there to the masses. And I think this is a great conduit to go ahead and do so. But also at the same time, it does paint another picture. Some people use it to celebratize themselves because they don't see the struggles and stuff that people went through to go ahead and get there. So you only see one side of the spectrum. I'm not saying, hey, go ahead and put out the dirt and all that stuff. Truth is truth. But at the same time, like, when you say real talk, we need to have real talk and say, hey, this didn't happen overnight. I know last month I put out an article in regards to measuring your success, but don't measure your success with somebody else's tape measure because you don't know what it took to go ahead and get there. And so I know when people, they're struggling with this doubt, these worries, this anxiety, is that, hey, stop, take a break, and then get out there. I challenge you to get out there.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. So you got some great analogies there. And, I had a call with somebody last night. We'll leave them nameless, but they called me and are like, hey, do you rehearse before you throw things out there? And I'm like, bro, I tell you what, just like this. So I'm a goofy guy, right? I'm a Southern boy. I quit caring about what people thought about me when I was about 4 years old. And yeah, I'll take feedback. I'll take constructive feedback. Absolutely. I'm not going to change who I am though, because that's what I'm about, right? So we can polish those things along the way. But Joe also put out something the other day on Legendary Leaders that hits to your point too, Greg, about all pennies spend the same. Right. And Adam, back to your point about, we all come in at a different speed, different pace, but we all have value. And as leaders, it's important for us to really communicate that and help people understand and believe that about themselves, that they have value. And I know you brothers would agree with me. But something I also want to touch on, Greg, you brought up. So the people that know us, right, that know you, Greg, know you, Adam, know me as Caleb, and some of them might throw a rank in there, right, on the military side, they know we have failed. Right, they saw us do it. They saw the things I screwed up on, you screwed up on. They saw how we responded. Right, talk for myself. Huh? But there's a lot of other people out there that maybe measuring their success with our tape measure because they don't know what we've been through. They don't know whether you look at it as an analogy of an iceberg or a mountain. Y'all know me; I love hiking, and I'll talk about mountains a lot. They don't know that trek, right? So they might look at you, Greg, and be like, that's a senior master sergeant if they're an airman, right? And looking at you like that, or even from the outside world saying, hey, I don't know much about the military, but that's a lot of stripes. And I think they only have like one more. So he's probably done really good. And same thing for you, Adam, right? That dude's at the top. So it's all, cake and ice cream or whatever you want to say. So I think it's important to a real talk perspective. And Adam, I'm going to kick this back to you is, for people to understand, for us to be vulnerable, right? So I appreciate y'all's vulnerability and courage to be live and to talk about these things as real people. But so from somebody that's, some senior NCOs in the Air Force that are vulnerable and say, hey, this is where I screwed up and this is where I failed. It did not stop me. I didn't get isolated and I was able to pick up and move on. So I think it's very, very important for us as leaders to it might not be grandiose, right? You might look and be like, oh, Caleb did this and oh my gosh, we're able to recover. I'm just going to tell you the truth. And Adam and Greg, I know y'all will too. So without further ado, Adam, if you'll just kind of walk us through what the experience that you wanted to share with the team about what that failure was, how you overcame that, and maybe just some of the feelings, whatever's on your mind, on your heart that you want to share with the team. So we'll just kick it back to you, brother.
Oh, sure thing. Hey, man, I had to take a ton of notes, and I'm sitting here and I was trying to be respectful of Greg's time, but like all your analogies, man, were spot on, and I was writing stuff all over the place. Like, you mentioned about all the failures it takes to make a success, and that's kind of like when Michael Jordan talks about all the failures he went through, the hundreds of thousands of missed shots and everything like that before he finally won something. And that's that iceberg model, right? Where you see that there's everything under the water, but nobody wants to look at that. Nobody wants to talk about that. And that kind of goes back to a little bit about what you were saying, Caleb, when you're talking about senior NCOs, right? And I think a lot of times airmen will look at a senior NCO, just like any master sergeant or above, and go, that guy's got his shit together. He's clearly operating on another level and doing what he's supposed to do. But they don't know that everyone has struggles. It doesn't matter what rank you are. You could be a 4-star general. I promise you got struggles. You got shortcomings. You got failures. But how you learn from them and recover from them is what makes that character valuable. And, to even circle back even further, Greg, you mentioned that, nurturing up those lower performers and taking care of them. And one of the biggest lessons I really learned is those guys that struggle, those guys that it takes a little bit more to develop them and they're going through some hardship, man, they make the best leaders at the end of the day because they know what it is to struggle. Some of these high performers that they never run into a brick wall, or seemingly, right? Everybody hits something. The ones that seem to have it a little bit easier, most people will look at it as they're perfect and nothing can go wrong for them. They're lucky, the universe aligns, That's not necessarily true. They just deal with struggle differently. They might be able to adapt easier. But those guys that are struggling, man, if you can help pick them up and build them, they have some of the most potential lying underneath the water that no one can see yet. But, you know, one of the big things I picked up based on the story that I started with on nurturing up those high performers and kind of overseeing or overlooking the low performers, and just, it's hard because you try to be consistent as a leader and you want to be authentic, and take care of your people in a way that they know what to expect from you, and be that good example, like all those things we talk about for leadership. But at the end of the day, it also comes down to your approach and how you can vary yourself with different people. And I learned that I had to be, I guess, more inconsistent with certain approaches, because you have to be more adaptable to different people. You can't take that copy cutter thing, even if you think it's slightly different, like you think you're being adaptive in altering your approach. In many ways, you might not be. And the hard part for me, being that supervisor, was digging for that feedback from those troops who are sometimes unwilling to really open up to you. And to me, that was a eye-opening experience to go like, okay, I'm not building enough trust with these people. I'm not investing my time in being vulnerable with them and kind of humanizing myself, versus just being this guy who shows up every day that they report to. And as soon as I recognized that, I could see, because I had the same thing kind of happen to me almost at the same time, where you're frustrated as a troop because you're not getting those clear expectations. You don't feel like your supervisor really connects to you. You don't have that trust there, that connection that that you would have between like yourself and what you'd consider a mentor, right? Not necessarily a supervisor, but a mentor. When you have that connection, it changes everything. And if you can build that connection as a supervisor to one of your ratees or one of your airmen, whether or not you rate on them, actually, it changes the game. And I would say that a lot of times it's not so much a failure to act. In a lot of ways, it was a failed approach, a failure to change and recognize that your approach kind of sucked.
Adam, if I can, sorry to cut you off, but I just, in my head, man, I was like, I got to ask you this question, because I think there's probably a lot of people that are either watching this live or watch it back later. Was there a moment where someone either said to you, or you're just like sitting there and reflecting on things where you're like, crap, I might be doing this a little bit wrong? Was there, because, I kind of shared a little bit and I'll share more, but Carlo was like, here, Chief, look at this podcast, and not actually, but he was like, here, take a look at this. Really, he was smacking me upside the head saying, hey, Chief, you're kind of going a little too fast on us. So was there a moment like that? If you could just describe that a little bit, if there was, and if not, no big deal, but if there was, just kind of describe that for us, how you realized that.
Man, there was probably quite a few moments before it really finally dinged, where somebody tried to like, hey, what about this? But I had one moment come while I was a master sergeant, and somebody pulled me aside and was like, man, you're just hard to keep up with. Like, I'm trying to learn from you, but learning from you and watching you is difficult for me. And that became a discussion. And as that discussion went, I was like, oh man, I really need to look at myself, because how things are being perceived based on what I'm doing, my behaviors wasn't what I thought they were.
No, thank you. Yeah, sometimes we wear that as a badge of honor, Greg. I don't know if you've ever felt that way or not, but I think all of us at some point in time have heard something similar to what you described there, Adam, right? And like, you'll hear either people say it like, that Vader right there, boy, I tell you what, he's always running 1,000 miles an hour, dude, never shuts down. But then there's people that try to keep up with you, and then you're like, Yeah, like I'm not saying this was you, Adam, but I can say it for myself. I was like, yeah, that's right. I'd be running 1,000 miles an hour. Keep up. But that's the wrong approach, right? So good on you, man, for realizing that and being able to take that feedback and kind of say, okay, well, how am I being perceived? Because there's nothing wrong with us running 1,000 miles an hour. It's just how do we expect other people to do that, and also being cognizant, like, I'd send emails out at like, I don't know, 2 o'clock in the morning. You know what I mean? Like, I'm embarrassed about it now, but I'm like, I got to get this stuff done. And then people would see that. And I'm like, well, dadgum, if the Chief's doing that, it means I got to do it too. So just being aware of those types of things, right, of how you're being perceived. So thanks for sharing, Adam. And I will circle to Greg, and then we'll come back around, just kind of keep this conversation going, but give Greg an opportunity to kind of share what he wanted to about, his failure and things he wanted to discuss with us. So go ahead, Greg.
Yeah. So as a leader, what we do is we leverage our experiences for, well, hopefully the greater good. But I think Adam touched on it, was that connection piece. And I would say, so October 6, 2006, that's a date I'll never forget. But I lost my brother to suicide. And so kind of goes back to that, that definitely that hurting piece. And I'm sure, like I said, if you guys look at the social media platforms, there's a lot of people out there, they talk about depression and stuff. And so it's about leveraging those experiences. And so I said, hey, I was the guy who would, yes, I still crack jokes and stuff like that, but very cognizant of how jokes are being cracked or who they're to. I think the changing point for me was, I don't want to say it's isolated just to that, but it was like, if I was in charge, I said, I would want to foster that environment where people would enjoy to come to work. Yeah, cracking jokes, we call it shop talk and stuff. And it's out there. But also at the same time, understanding, hey, when people come to work or what people bring to the table, you're working a very diverse work environment. And so people coming from all different walks of life, and that could be their ticking point. And I said, hey, I didn't want to be that individual. So, I'm the guy who's always come into work smiling. If I'm not smiling, then, people call me Crest at one time. But it was about fostering an environment where, come to work, enjoy to work. If you don't enjoy doing something, you're working for somebody or something. But that was my turning point. And it's about leveraging those experiences that I had to say, hey, we can use this for the greater good. Because I can't tell you how many times I've had talks with individuals where, they did think about killing themselves and stuff. I had a little bit of shirt experience as well, and just the stories and stuff that came out of there. But being able to connect, like Adam said, that was something definitely that I was able to do just based off of that story alone. And yes, there's many other failures and stuff that I have been exposed to that I'm able to use those experiences as well. Whether it be public speaking, butchering, stuff like that at a retirement ceremony.
Greg, you're not afraid of public speaking. Come on now.
Well, no, but there are some times. So I did instructing for 4 years, but there are times, just like everybody else, like, hey, sometimes you get nervous. I even came on here and said, hey, what am I going to talk about in regards to that? Just think about that the last couple of days and say, how can I relate to the audience that's actually watching this? And it really, I'm a doer. I really am. Do I expect failure? Absolutely. I expect failure in myself, but I learn from that. And that's why I take that same stuff and I push that out to my guys and say, hey, if you fail, all right, man, we'll work through this. We'll get through it together. So I'm going to help you out. And that's exactly pretty much how the speech goes. I'm going to help you out. Yes, we can go down into that and talk about choices. So either I'm going to help you out or I'm going to help you out. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I'm going to help you out.
No, that's good, Greg. There's saying we have in the military. It doesn't matter what branch you're in. I want to be able to help you, but don't handcuff me as a leader, right? Don't handcuff me, because if you get handcuffed, then you're gonna, handcuff me and my abilities, what I'm able to do to assist you. So absolutely, 100%. So I just got the 10-minute warning, guys. So I'll speed through mine, and then I'll go around the room, so to speak, one more time. But so yeah, what I wanted to share with the team was, Adam, you and Greg have both hit on it, especially you, Adam, talking about, going too fast. And I shared a little bit about what Carlo Mangoba, gave me a podcast and kind of smacked me upside the head. But I would like to go back before that even, because I'm a continuous learning dude, right? I screw up stuff all the time, because that's what happens when you're a door kicker, right? You go kick the door open, you're probably going to be the first one to get shot. And using that as an analogy in the leadership forum, if you will, I'm always going to walk through that door, because I want to know what's on the other side of it, and I want to be able to help people. So sometimes when you walk through the door, you get shot, i.e. sometimes you walk through the door and you fail at something, and that's just the way it is. So I'd like to, and from a leadership perspective, I've been on that horse, like we've talked about, since I was a staff sergeant, probably before that, but as a staff and a tech. And I was a black and white type of leader. And what I mean by that is I was sticking to the rules, if you know what I mean, right? So like really locking in, and there's no gray area, there's no wiggle room, and we're going to do it at 1,000 miles an hour. We're going to do right at 1,000 miles an hour. And if you're not on that train, your ass is getting left behind. And that was my mentality. And I'm not proud of that, but that was my mentality. And sometimes that's effective, depending on the situation. If you're in a combat situation, like a few of us have been in, that's effective, because you just need to go, shoot, move, and communicate. That's just what you do. But in a leadership perspective, it's not. So what I was doing is I was crushing people and crushing shops as I moved through. So for our civilian audience, there's not a whole lot of people that maybe move around a whole lot, but as us in the military, we have an opportunity to go to different locations. So being a manager, if you will, for a few locations versus a leader, I'd puff my chest out, because I'd leave the shop and I'd be like, oh yeah, they're calling now because, they're missing old Caleb, Well, they were missing me because I did not build leaders. I'm just going to be honest. I did not build leaders. I failed at that miserably. I built conformers. That's what I did. People would shut up and get in line because they didn't want to deal with me, right? Either one, they didn't want to be embarrassed by the speed, or they just didn't want to be dealing with my, ass on my shoulders. Just be honest. So I built a bunch of conformers versus leaders. So one time I was sharing that story with the senior mass sergeant when I got to a location. I'll leave names out because I did not clear it with them to see if I could share their piece of the story. So we'll leave it a little bit vague for everyone. But I was sitting down in his office and I was telling him about this, that, and the other thing about this previous shop I'd been in. And he just looked me right in the eye and he goes, well, you're failing. That's what the problem is. You're building conformers, you're not building leaders. But it wasn't like a flip of the switch. So what I want everybody to understand watching this is, when we fail and having to understand that we failed, it's not like you can just flip the switch, or at least not for me, in my perspective and my experiences. I couldn't just flip the switch and say, okay, now I'm not failing at that anymore. It was a learning process. I had to go back. And then I know he won't mind me sharing, Colonel Brian Duffy. I sat down with Colonel Duffy, now retired, and he helped me a lot. He helped me more than he realized, probably, or at least it wasn't official or formal feedback and mentorship. But he helped me kind of break that down and what I was missing from a leadership perspective, and how I wasn't showing attention to those who are riding a different horse. Like Adam, like you pointed out earlier, I would look and say, okay, if you don't meet muster within the first 5 minutes of me talking to you, then you're not on my train. It's not going to happen. And then sure, you might want to try to catch up later, but the train's already gone. So he helped me break that down. So that's where I want to share with the audience is, when we fail, it's one thing to acknowledge that we have failed at something. And then it's another step, and continuous steps after that, the journey right up the mountain, of understanding like, hey, now I've got to be cognizant of these things that I'm doing. Well, you fast forward to I'm Chief Mass Sergeant, go down to Moody Air Force Base, and I'm driving Senior Mass Sergeants and Mass Sergeant Flight Chiefs crazy. I don't even realize it, right? I'm just like, boom, we got to go, until Carlo Mangoba comes along. And I think that's why it resonated so much with me, is because I'd already been told this before. And so I failed forward essentially, but then I kind of fell back into some old habits, right? And just thinking, okay, now you're chill, you've slowed down, but I still wasn't doing it right. So yes, I know, like to your point, Greg, we could go down so many different areas. And if you know me and you're watching me right now, you're like, hey, Caleb, you left out a whole bunch of other failures. Yes, I know I did, because we don't have time for that. We could do just a whole life series on Caleb's failures, and it would be good for everybody to learn for sure. But what I wanted to highlight was, hey, I failed here. And then I did a portion of that failure a little bit later down the timeline. So I want everybody to be aware and think about, hey, once we got to acknowledge what our failure is, be able to learn from it and grow from it. And it's okay sometimes, I'm not just saying this because I did it, but sometimes you're going to fall back into that trap, right? And that's why it's good to have your circle. I call it this close circle, the circle of five. Those people that know when to stick a boot in your backside or a hand on your shoulder and be like, hey, it's all right. Because as a chief master sergeant and for our civilian partners, that you might be somewhere up there in that chain, if you will, of more of a senior level management in your organization, we're going to fail. And it's okay to let people know that you failed, right? And I think that's where we build credibility as leaders, because Chief BK will talk about it, the sliding scale of trust and transparency. So you got to show people a whole lot of transparency before you build that trust. So
Amen.
for me, what I do, and in the military, I think is pivotal we do this because our team is always changing. So we have to have a unique harmony, Gina Dawkins, thanks for that word, a unique harmony between trust and transparency, because you're new to the team and you might not know me, so you're going to need a little bit of transparency, right? So for me, that transparency as a leader is to say, Greg, to your point, like, hey, you failed. Come on, dust yourself off. Hey, I know what it feels like to be on the ground. I know what it feels like to be all dirty and dusty, because I spent most of my career, most of my life on the ground. But in a serious, you have to be able to, build credibility with your team. Don't make crap up because they're going to see right through that anyway. But being able to tell them like, hey, I haven't failed exactly like you just failed, but failure is failure in that regard. Here's how I move forward from my experiences, a lot more than what we described here. I know you can do it. I have faith in you, right? So anyway, not to belabor that a whole lot, and we're crunched on time, and I want to get back to you guys because it's not about me here, but that's just in a nutshell. Hey, understand that you have failure. Listen to that feedback, that constructive feedback. Understand you have failure and build and grow from that. And just know you're not perfect. No leader's perfect. No human being's perfect, and you're going to fall again. But you got a little bit of experience now to how to get up, right? And surround yourself with good people like you, Adam and Greg. That's why I got y'all in the circle, right? Of somebody that's not afraid to tell me like, hey, you're screwing up a little bit, dude. So to wrap this up real quick, I think we've got I think my timer says 2 minutes, 58 seconds. So Adam, quick wrap up and final notes, and same thing for you, Greg.
So first I'll say thanks for inviting us to do this. This is awesome. I'm certainly ready to sign up for another one, man. And I appreciate all the mentorship and guidance over the years. But to wrap this up real quick, I'd say as leaders, to Greg's point, you have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to put yourself out there, not necessarily knowing that you're wrong, but be willing that, hey, if I am wrong, that's okay, and I can recover from it. And then invest the time in learning in that. That way you can fail forward and keep growing. It's that journey, that continuous growth. And when your people see that and your people understand that vulnerability, they'll be willing to follow suit and do the same because they'll see that it's okay. When you're open and you recognize like, hey, by the way, guys, sorry, I was wrong about this that I said. We're going to correct course and go this way now. Thanks for following me. And I promise I'm taking care of you. And that vulnerability builds trust.
That's great, Adam. Hashtag truth on that one, brother.
Yeah.
All right, Greg, final words. You'll have the last one. So when it cuts off, just know we're done. I'll have to catch up with you guys later.
Hey, so you can see, hey, mentoring minute with Whitted. So if I only have a minute, that's it. So as leaders, we need to go ahead and produce feeders, okay? Those that are going to pour out into other people. With that being said, if you're stuck in me mode and you're a leader, like, hey, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me, you're not leading, okay? So we need to produce feeders, okay? So from an engineering standpoint, we should be building bridges and knocking down barriers. So as a leader, if you're faced with those barriers, you better be knocking them down, helping your people out to knock them down. Start building bridges, start building those connections. Mentoring minute with Whitted.
Awesome. Thanks, brother. You got that done in about 24 seconds. That was good. That was mentoring minute with Whitted time or on speed, right?
Well, I got a minute to go ahead and do it. It's not a literal minute, okay?
All right. No, it's all good. Hey, brothers, it is truly about to cut us off. Thanks again for being having the courage to step forward and be a little bit vulnerable and just share with our teammates, right? So don't be surprised if you get hit up with some questions. So for our audience, it'll be a podcast, and you'll see it on Facebook Live, and then we'll drop a video. If you got some questions for these awesome leaders, these awesome brothers of mine, and you want to hit them up and ask them some questions, please do so. Brothers, like Sam Steele says, hashtag salute. We'll see y'all on the flip side.
Peace out. Thanks.
Later.